Intermittent fasting gets a lot of hype these days. Personally, I don't get it. Not eating? What is this, the Great Depression? It's like the new CrossFit. You don't have to wonder if someone does it because it'll be the first thing they say when you meet them. There is truly nothing more annoying than when someone bases their whole identity around a diet or training modality. But here we are in 2024, where everyone has to be part of a group, and people think that inclusivity starts with exclusivity. But I digress. My name is Paul O'Neid, and I've been one of the strongest people on the planet. I've ranked in the top 20 all-time in powerlifting in 2 different weight classes. I've been a strength and conditioning coach for 18 years, having coached some of the strongest athletes on the planet and coached in the NCAA Division I, Division II, and CIS, as well as professional athletes across all major sports. I also have 2 master's degrees along the way. I've seen it, I've done it, and I've got the scars and the trophies to prove it. Today, we're going to talk about intermittent fasting and why the hype is completely misguided and misappropriated. I feel like I'm being pretty biased right now, so I'm going to backpedal. Yes, I have an opinion. Yes, I think intermittent fasting should be reserved for people who've been kidnapped or held in an off-the-grid penitentiary of some kind. But also, yes, I have my opinion based on the relevant data available to us on the subject. And if anyone wants to refute me in the comments, I'd be happy to hear it. So pop a comment down below. Back to it. Today, we're going to talk about why intermittent fasting isn't special, why the hype around it has been primarily used to push an agenda, sell products, and mislead people into believing that weight loss can be as simple as not eating. To do that, we're going to run through the list of potential benefits by which intermittent fasting is purported to be a panacea of health and weight loss. We're going to look at the data, and we're going to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. All the relevant citations will be available in the description, so you know I'm not totally full of shit like everybody else. Plus, I love me some nerdy science. Let's get to it. First off, let's get the biggest one out of the way. Intermittent fasting is supposed to help you lose more weight than conventional dieting. Well, this one is super simple. They are called laws of thermodynamics for a reason. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but only converted into another form of energy. Calories in minus calories out equals energy stored. In order to lose weight, we need to be in a negative calorie balance. So we need more calories out than calories in. There is no way to circumvent this. It's a law of physics. So we're going to all agree here that in order to lose weight, you need to be in a caloric deficit. Deal? Cool. Let's move on. Here's where we need to really dive into what the argument is and where the confusion lies. Are we asking the question, does intermittent fasting help us to lose more fat while eating in the same caloric deficit? Or are we asking the question, does intermittent fasting help us to create a larger caloric deficit? There is only one single way fat loss occurs, and that is through a caloric deficit. We agreed on it. Remember? So in order for it to be more effective than conventional dieting, intermittent fasting would have to either magically burn more fat in the same caloric deficit or help you to eat less calories than conventional dieting. Well, let's get one thing straight. At no point does not eating lead you towards retaining more muscle mass than eating. Retaining muscle mass would be the sole mechanism by which you could argue that 2 diets, calorically equated, could differ in their ability to burn fat. Retaining muscle would offset metabolic adaptation to some degree, and therefore the percentage of weight loss would be more so fat. But simply by us talking it out, you can see that that's a bit asinine to think that not eating could preserve muscle mass. And you'd be right. But let's keep things legit. There is actually no difference in the retention of lean mass when intermittent fasting and conventional dieting practices were compared. To be honest, that surprised me, but it's true. And it does make sense because as long as the same calories are consumed within a 24-hour period, there doesn't seem to be any differences when it comes to meal frequency. Whether you eat your food in 2 meals or in 10, if the same calories are consumed within 24 hours, the outcomes are the same. I know that flies in the face with the majority of social media influencers' narratives, but on this channel, we don't peddle the bullshit, we just spit facts. So, does intermittent fasting help us lose more fat than conventional dieting? Thumbs down. But it's no better or worse than conventional dieting. Next, we have to look at whether intermittent fasting allows you to eat less calories and adhere to a larger caloric deficit, and therefore create more fat loss. This one makes a lot more sense in theory, because if you're spending less time per day eating, it stands to reason that you might end up consuming less total calories. Unfortunately, the optimism is slapped in the face by the data. The only way this could happen is if intermittent fasting decreased your hunger signaling, which it doesn't. In fact, again, there was no difference between groups whether intermittent fasting was compared with conventional dieting when it came to hunger signaling. That all being said, I'll bring in my own personal experience here, since I've both dieted to very low body fat levels myself and helped others do the same. If you're following a strict diet and accountable to your macros or meal plan, delaying that first meal of the day can be very helpful in avoiding over-consuming calories. Practically speaking, hunger signaling for me and most of my clients seems to be lowest in the morning. And if we delay that first meal a few hours, that means the spacing of our meals in the evening can be closer together. That means when hunger signaling is the highest, we can just eat the foods we're supposed to be eating. This only works if you have a ton of discipline, because the longer you wait to eat that first meal, the easier it will be to overconsume calories due to that high hunger signaling. I've seen this time and time again with my lifestyle clients. They decide to try intermittent fasting and it goes well for a week or two, and then all of a sudden the floodgates open and they find it impossible to adhere to their nutritional targets. Anecdotally, this is why I prefer a more steady meal frequency throughout the day for most clients. Notice I said most, because some people thrive when they don't have to eat in the morning, and they report being incredibly energetic and productive. The last things we're going to look at here is the cardiometabolic function. Does intermittent fasting improve your blood markers for cardiovascular disease as compared to conventional dieting? I'll be honest, this is one where I really wanted to find the magic of intermittent fasting. It makes sense on the surface. You're spending more time with lower blood glucose, which should positively impact insulin sensitivity, which is closely linked to cardiometabolic issues such as type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and high levels of inflammation. Could the magic of intermittent fasting be in the effect it can have on your blood work? Again, the research cannot tease out a difference between conventional dieting strategies and intermittent fasting. Being in a caloric deficit does that too. Trust me, I tried to look for the science. I tried to look for the magic. It's just not there. Being in a caloric deficit, by whatever means you achieve it, will lower insulin resistance, improve your cholesterol numbers, lower blood pressure, and decrease inflammation. The only way intermittent fasting is superior is that these changes seem to happen much faster. How much faster? That'll depend on the person, but because abstaining from food is a very immediate intervention, it seems to cause these positive cardiometabolic effects quicker than simply reducing total caloric intake throughout the day. So to me, intermittent fasting gets a thumbs up for improving blood work for this reason alone. For those of you watching who are enhanced or coming off of a period of high androgen use, or you're natural and just spent a large period of time pushing calories up and carrying a significant amount of fat, starting your mini cut or health phase with an intermittent fasting protocol could potentially bring your blood work back to baseline sooner than just starting to drop calories. Again, you have to weigh the potential negatives that come with not eating. And this is where my bias comes in big time. If the goal is to be as big and as strong as possible, there are a few non-negotiables that intermittent fasting really falls short on. Which brings me to the next question. Does intermittent fasting increase mental acuity, focus, and energy? Well, there's a growing body of research that in fact supports intermittent fasting having a positive impact on cognitive function. Here, there's a lot of mud in the water because we need to tease out whether the benefits of intermittent fasting are due to factors outside of a caloric deficit, meaning that being in a moderate caloric deficit also increases mental acuity, focus, and energy. And that seems to be the consensus among top researchers in obesity. The calorie deficit is the magic, and a calorie deficit is associated with most, if not all, of the same potential benefits as intermittent fasting. But for the sake of today and being fully transparent, I want to share a few really interesting things that happen when we abstain from eating. First off, any change to the diet will affect the gut microbiome. So, of course, intermittent fasting will cause some changes to your gut flora, and those can have some really interesting effects. First, it can cause a change in your neurotransmitters, since most of them are produced in the gut. They'll support a more positive mood. Intermittent fasting also increases BDNF, or brain-derived neurotropic factor, which increases neuroplasticity and could potentially positively impact neurological degeneration with age, and has shown promise in offsetting the progression of certain brain diseases. As someone who is very interested in increasing his productivity and living a long and vibrant life, I really want to believe that there was some magic here. But unfortunately, the research to date is spotty at best, and overall, the calorie deficit seems to be where the true benefits lie. Simply put, when we eat less, we are higher function, which kind of sucks, because if you're watching this video and following me, you probably want to eat big, get big, and look like a superhero. And if that's the case, you know that when you eat more food, you feel and act like a lazy piece of shit. And the moment you start dieting or enter into a prep, you feel like a superstar. So, does intermittent fasting improve energy levels and support cognitive function? Thumbs up. but it's no better or worse than just being in a calorie deficit. First, we need to preserve the quality of our training. Abstaining from food can decrease our glycogen stores and potentially reduce the intensity of training. Next, we want to ensure we're maximizing muscle protein synthesis. We have to remember that the research conducted does not take into account people who carry a lot of muscle tissue and train like animals, like we do. Recovery from training is a 24-hour process, so if we're avoiding foods for over half of that time period, recovery will not be as effective, and therefore your ability to adapt to the training could potentially be negatively impacted. Last, we need to make sure that we're eating enough. The people who are used in research for these studies are typically obese, metabolically compromised, and do not have high caloric needs. Shortening the feeding window makes it harder to eat enough protein because it is highly satiating and puts additional stress on the digestive system by requiring a large volume of food to be processed in a shorter period of time. Intermittent fasting just isn't feasible for big, strong people who have high caloric requirements and usually leads to some sort of GI distress when that large amount of food is processed in a shortened time frame. Now that we've got everything on the table, I think it's safe to say that the evidence is spotty at best when it comes to supporting any positive benefits of intermittent fasting outside of simply allowing you to achieve a caloric deficit. That is where the magic lies. Eating less calories will allow you to lose weight, improve cognition, improve your blood work. It doesn't really matter how you get there. When you layer on the needs of someone who's wanting to build a muscular physique with high-level performance capacity, intermittent fasting falls short in a number of key areas. IF is not a quick fix, but it does have some practical benefits at the very tail end of a deep dieting phase, or if you need to get your blood work in order as quickly as possible. So it's not totally useless. The key here is adherence. If you find that shortening your feeding window helps you to adhere to a diet more easily, by all means, you're not going to be shooting yourself in the foot for performance, but there may be some concessions you'll need to accept. For me, it's something I'll rarely advise a client to do outside of rare circumstances where they either prefer it or they're coming to me with some pretty serious health concerns. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments below if you had experiences with intermittent fasting and how you felt it was better or worse. I'd love to discuss further. Thanks for watching and keep raising the bar.